Yeah. Is there any like misconceptions or blind spots other than abdication or really just ignorance or and meaning they're ignoring it, right? Or they're avoiding it. Is there any other sort of common mistakes or common pitfalls that you see business owners either making or not making when it comes to doing this?
I think there's just like misinformation out there. I think that there's a lot of questions. Probably the most common question I get is, what's the difference between a trust and a will? And I think a lot of people think that it's an either or situation. And ultimately, those documents are meant to work in tandem with one another.
Is there
As
a easy distinction between those two?
the biggest distinction, the two function similarly, which is probably why they get confused. But the biggest distinction is that when you have a will at the time of your death, that will still needs to go through the probate process. When you have a trust, you can bypass that probate process. So both of those documents, like at their core, are meant to say, okay, where's my stuff? Who's in charge of my stuff at the time of my death? And who's my stuff going to? Right. And the difference is, do you want to be subject, or do you want your heirs to have to deal with that court process or not? And so I think like another kind of misconception related to that is that trusts are only for the rich people. We think of so commonly trust fund babies, but ultimately, it's not about the amount of your wealth. It's about the purpose that it serves. And it is that bypass of that process, which ultimately is easier. It makes your assets more accessible, your business more accessible, more easily accessible after your death, and avoids delays, stress, all those things, costs.
Is the field different now because of whether it's technology or legislation? I know this has been something that you've been pursuing for years, but you mentioned these misconceptions about what it is. Are there things that have changed or things that matter more now because of the way things have evolved over the last several years?
I would say that people are, in terms of like the laws changing and things like that, there are technicalities with like tax laws being changing kind of how distributions can be made and the timing of those distributions. Um, there's certainly laws that are impacting the federal estate tax, for example. There's a federal estate tax, which means that if you die, at the time that you die, if you hold this amount of assets, anything beyond that can be taxed. Now, at this point in time, there was a law passed back in 2018 that basically changed the federal tax exemption to a larger amount, which means you could acquire more wealth at the time of your death and you would not be taxed. We are now at the point where we're like at 15 million. And so you can die with $15 million and not be taxed by the federal government. Anything above that, you will be. The law that was passed in 2018 was actually set to sunset at the end of this year. So December 31st, 2025, it was going to revert back to what the pre 2018 um, amount was, which at that time was about 5 to 6 million. Now, with inflation, it would have gone to, in today's world, it would go back to about 6 to 7 million, right? Um, but with the way the government is now and who's in charge of the government, that law is almost certainly not going to sunset. They're going to continue it so that the federal tax exemption stays high. So, yes, there are constantly, and that means that fewer people are going to be taxed by the federal government upon their death. I mean, $15 million at the time that you die, that's a lot of money. So there's certainly laws that are impacting estate planning on a day-to-day basis, and all these different parts that overlap with estate planning, right? Like taxes, just like the whole wealth picture that is involved with estate planning. Um, but I just think that with those misconceptions out there, and just kind of like the old thoughts of, well, trusts are only for the rich, and that's the most basic example. People are starting to understand more, and I hope estate planners are doing a better job of explaining better what is actually the purpose of all these documents and why they matter for you instead of just these, you know, insurmountable pieces of paper that you're just like, "Oh my goodness." But hopefully that information is becoming more available through like social media and things like that. So, sure, the game's changing. I mean, there's laws being passed for virtual signing of estate planning. So, it's just keeping an eye on all of that and how it's kind of changing with our world. And it's always subject to change like anything else.